Hello, Cleveland! Hello, Browns fans. This is part 3 of the Cleveland Podcast's Cleveland Browns 2020 Year in Review. "2020 was an unprecedented year of success in the modern era of the Cleveland Browns, not only reaching the playoffs for the first time since 2002, but also winning their first playoff game since 1994. It was a season that offered the city of Cleveland hope and excitement in a year that was, well, otherwise not so great. With the pandemic making gatherings extremely difficult, the NFL still found a way to play every game of the regular season. But it didn't happen without adversity, especially for the Cleveland Browns. Only needing to beat the struggling New York Jets in order to secure a playoff spot in the second to the last game of the season, the Cleveland Browns found themselves competing without 8 of their players, including their top 4 wide receivers, all due to COVID protocols. They came up short versus the Jets, but in the final week of the season, the Pittsburgh Steelers made the mistake of sitting many of their best starters in hopes of having a playoff rematch against the Browns. In this, part 3 of our Cleveland Browns 2020 Year in Review, we'll be talking with our contributors about the Browns' return to the postseason, their playoff run, and we'll take a look back at the 2020 season. In this episode, we'll hear from Mike and Jason from Dog Pound Nation, a Cleveland Browns podcast, Phil from Youngstown, a co-host of a podcast called History's B-Side, Dan in Cincinnati, Oz in the United Kingdom, Jordy in Vancouver, host of the Gambler's Prophecy podcast, and last but not least, Tim Boulware from Fremont, Ohio. Join us in reliving what it was like to finally see the Browns reemerge as a true contender in the NFL.
Coming to you from deep beneath the murky waters that lie beyond the Lake Erie shoreline. This is the Cleveland Podcast! With Fred the Mud Monster and South Bay Caesar. Find us online at facebook.com/The Cleveland Podcast or email us at theclevelandpodcast@gmail.com. Now, join us as we journey through Northeast Ohio and the city of Cleveland.
Hey, Fred! We're back for the third part of the Cleveland Browns 2020 Year in Review.
They always say that the third part in a trilogy is the worst part, except in Lord of the Rings. That's probably the best part. So let's just hope that we're Lord of the Rings and the Return of the King in this episode.
I'm just going to walk around for 2 hours and drop a ring in the volcano.
And I'll be saying, my precious, my precious. Sorry, I am not Andy Serkis. I'm not quite good at the whole Gollum thing. But apparently, though, he had to drink a special concoction of different teas and herbs in order to make sure that his throat wasn't ripped to shreds. So fun facts about all the Lord of the Rings setups. Andy Serkis drank something totally unusual, some honey tea and different types of herbs combination in order to keep his throat going while he was playing his Gollum. Also, he actually drooled on set live in order to kind of further mimic the whole Gollum thing. So if you go through the scenes and you see a little bit of Gollum spit, that's not Gollum, that's Andy Serkis in a CGI suit.
All right, why don't we talk about sports?
All right, we're talking about that. Sorry.
We only have a few questions left for this part, for the Cleveland Browns portion of this podcast. And then Fred and I will wrap up this episode by looking back at some of the other things that happened in sports.
My precious.
In the year 2020. The Browns' return to the playoffs started out in a really exciting fashion when Cleveland took a 28-0 first quarter lead over the Steelers in the AFC wildcard round. They held on to the lead and finished the game 48-37. I asked our guests, what was it like to have the Browns back in the playoffs? Answering in order is Phil from Youngstown and Dan from Cincinnati.
Leading up to the playoff game, I'm from Youngstown, where we have a pretty even split between Browns fans and Steelers fans. So a lot of the Steelers fans around us were talking trash about how it was going to be an easy win and they're so much better than the Browns, and we were playing all their backups last week, and we felt like we had nothing to lose. You start the week losing your head coach and offensive linemen and a couple other key players, and the Browns, we made the playoffs. We're happy to be there, but they weren't content. And we had this feeling that, they really could come out there and win this game. And heck, the Steelers were the ones who had the pressure on them. It was a home playoff game. They're the ones who talked about how they started the year 11-0 and they were the clear better team. And the Browns were able to just play loose, come out there and go out and win a playoff game. It was one of the most exciting nights I've had watching the Browns game, texting some of my Cleveland fans, some of my Pittsburgh fans, and talking some trash along the way. It was a lot of fun to see them come out there and really smack the Steelers in the first quarter and get off to that early lead and then just carry it on throughout the whole game.
I felt confident we would beat Pittsburgh, but I never thought it would happen the way it did. 28 points in the first quarter, unreal. And I love that we capitalized on our turnovers. That's how you win games. And I was just surprised that it got off to such a good start.
When the Browns beat the Steelers, they advanced to the divisional round of the playoffs and traveled to Kansas City. There was a controversial no call by the referees of a helmet-to-helmet hit by the Kansas City defense. The helmet-to-helmet hit resulted in Rashard Higgins fumbling the ball, which ended up being a turnover. Instead of the score being 10-16 at halftime, Kansas City marched down the field and scored another field goal, making the score 19-3 instead of 10-16. But in the second half, the Browns saw signs of life when Patrick Mahomes was forced out of the game with a concussion. But backup Chad Henne came in and did enough for Kansas City to keep the lead. In a tough, well-fought game, the Cleveland Browns came up short. I asked our guests how they felt about this loss, and here are their answers. In order, Dan from Cincinnati, Phil from Youngstown, and Jason and Mike from North Olmsted.
What was it like when the Browns lost to the Chiefs? It was frustrating, but in the end, it felt good. I felt fine. It's the picture from The Office. Think of the Michael Scott from The Office where he's crying and smiling, and it's captioned, when the Browns lose to the Chiefs, but you're still proud of your team. I'm insanely proud of this team. But going back to the game, I felt our defense was poor at times when it mattered, and that really hurt us. I felt Hunt should have had more touches in the first half, and that no call was garbage. Not saying that we would still have won. Obviously, play calls would have been a lot different. Just a whole alternate universe would be created if we got that touchdown. But that would have been a huge momentum swing. Now, the big thing I had a problem with was that punt on fourth down that Kevin decided to go with. I think he should have gone for it. I understand there's 4 minutes left. You're on your own, 30-yard line? But you only have one timeout with an offense you haven't been able to stop. I don't know. I question it. 3 timeouts? Yeah, I can understand punting it. But with 1 timeout, I just didn't agree. And then letting the backup just pick you apart, passing-wise, running-wise, you can't have that happen in a playoff game. So that was very disappointing. But yeah, I'm 100% happy. Nobody expected this with COVID, rookie head coach, what happened last year, Cleveland being Cleveland, etc. I don't think a lot of people expected this. So for so many reasons not to be successful, we overcame, which is awesome. I love to see it. We 100% overachieved and our future looks great. Something we haven't been able to say in a very long time. And I'm so happy to say that.
I think week 2 of the playoffs, we kind of had similar expectations going into it. Nobody really expected the Browns to come out there and knock off the Super Bowl champion Chiefs. So it was really one of those, hey, if we perform and we win this game, it's going to be real exciting and we're going to be real proud that we could do it. But, we're happy to be here. We've accomplished a lot more than we expected to as Browns fans this year. So it is disappointing that they lost that game, especially on such a kind of stupid rule. And also a terrible missed helmet-to-helmet contact penalty. But at the end of the day, it's hard to be disappointed with how the Browns season ended this year. That's the first time in a very long time that we've even made it that far in the playoffs. So to be able to just even still be talking about the Browns and it's not a conversation about draft picks or new head coach, that's pretty exciting. And I'm happy to see where this team is going. And maybe we can run it back next year and, really take the Chiefs down after their Super Bowl appearance this year.
It was a bittersweet moment, but I can't complain too much against us losing against the Chiefs, only because of the fact that we took it to them. They were able to make a huge game against us the first half, but we came back that second half, and for us to come back and only lose by 5 was something to say. We were able to do a lot against the Chiefs to show that we can hang with the big boys. We can hang with these monster teams that no one would think that the Browns had a chance against. as much as I want to also give credit to the Chiefs this game, it wasn't so much that we lost to the Chiefs as we lost to the NFL referees that game.
That one play call would have changed the whole impact of that game. The Browns would have been back in that game. They would have been back within, I think, 2 or 3 points at the time. And considering that the Chiefs only put up, I believe, 3 more points the rest of the game at that point, with the Browns touchdown later in the game, the Browns would have been up and they would have won. I mean, people could easily say, oh yeah, sure, we don't know what would have happened if the Browns would have gotten that touchdown. Things might have changed. Yeah, sure. But when it comes down to it, a bad play call probably costed the Browns a chance at the AFC Championship. Plain and simple.
It was a really great season for the Browns. It was really fun to watch. It was really exciting. It was fun to see all the energy, all the hope, and all the energy in the city. And as we look forward to 2021 and the Browns' upcoming season, I asked our guests what they expect the 2021 Browns to look like. How will they be different? What are the expectations? Answering in order is Boz in the UK, Phil from Youngstown, then once again Mike and Jason from Dog Pound Nation, a Cleveland Browns podcast.
The question is, what do you think that the 2021 Browns will look like? I think not much different to the 2020 Browns, to be honest. The only difference will be the added weight of expectation from the owners, the coaches, the fans, the media. It's going to be a high-pressure year.
The Browns could definitely use some help in 2021 with defense for sure. Whether it's adding in better secondary players, whether it's safeties or cornerbacks or bulking up on their linebackers, those are definitely positions that they could benefit from improving during this offseason. The offense seems to be starting to get it together a little bit. They really were firing on all cylinders towards the end of the season. And the offensive line, really, as long as there weren't, COVID positives taking players out of the game, and even the guys that were stepping in behind them were really doing a good job of protecting Baker. I think towards the end of the season, he was one of the least touched quarterbacks in the league, and you saw his interceptions drop as a result. So that's definitely been a strong suit, or at least it was late in the year this year. And once that defense is able to start holding teams back a little bit more, there won't be as much pressure on the offense to need to perform every time they have the ball.
I believe, based upon what Andrew Berry has said about the number one priority being to build the defense up, I am a firm believer that if they do this, and they go out and they mix some good draft picks along with some veteran defensive players, and they beef up the defense and make them ruthless and cutthroat, I firmly believe the Cleveland Browns could be in the Super Bowl next year. I think they could be. I think they've proved they can beat the Chiefs. They're on the same page with them. And if you can get past the Chiefs like they almost did, you can get past anybody in the NFL, because the Chiefs are one of the league's best, and the Browns prove they can stick with them. So I firmly believe the Browns could very well be in the 2021 Super Bowl next year.
I can see there being a rematch between the Browns and the Chiefs in the AFC. The Browns will get by them this time, and we're going to be looking at a Browns team that will not only make the Super Bowl, but I think are going to be the dark horse Super Bowl winners.
And Tim Boulware from Fremont, Ohio, sent us in answers to the same questions, and I'm going to go ahead and play those.
Now, what do the Cleveland Browns do for next year? I think they need to bring back Odell Beckham Jr. They need to have that threat on the outside. Jarvis Landry is a great possession receiver, and he is sure-handed most times in catching the football from Baker Mayfield, and they have developed a rapport, but you got to have a guy to stretch the field. Will Hodges be that guy? Will Hollywood Higgins be that guy? Will Donovan Peoples-Jones be that guy? They all could be. With more experience, they certainly could be. But you need to have another guy to add to Odell Beckham Jr., stretch out that defense. And what are you going to have with Beckham anyway and coming off that ACL tear? Well, we'll have to find out. But the Browns need to add some depth at wide receiver. And quite frankly, the defense has to improve. It has to get faster. They have to have help with Olivier Vernon being out for the year with the Achilles. They have to figure out another guy to complement with Myles Garrett. They also have to get better linebackers, and they need some depth at either corner or safety to be able to cover more of these speed wide receivers. The Chiefs had a lot of options, and the Browns really had trouble covering them. And it was a good thing that the Browns did start to ratchet up the heat in the second half of that playoff game against the Chiefs, or else the Chiefs would have ran away with the game. So good job by the Browns to use the personnel that they did have, but they need some upgrades, especially defensively. And that's going to be a problem in the offseason because the Browns have their top 5 tacklers all eligible for free agency. But as I look at this Browns franchise, they have made a great transition. No one knew what to expect of this team at the beginning of the year. Kevin Stefanski was thrown a lot of obstacles, and he was able to weather every storm. The Browns finally have a captain at the helm, and they have a good GM in Andrew Berry who knows the franchise and knows what is needed to build this team to the next level. The franchise did a great job in getting to the playoffs. That was their next level after a 6-10 season under Freddie Kitchens, a team that was in disarray at the end of last season in 2019. Now it's time to build to the next step because you know that the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes aren't going anywhere. You know the Bills and Josh Allen aren't going anywhere. And you know the Ravens and Lamar Jackson aren't going anywhere. And if you look at the division, it's up for the taking because the Browns have the only reliable running game with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb that the other teams don't have. James Conner disappeared in the second half of last year for the Steelers in 2020. And let's face it, the Bengals don't have a reliable running game. And besides Lamar Jackson at the quarterback position, the Ravens don't have a reliable running game. To be able to have that edge, the Browns have a chance to win the division and to be able to host home playoff games, which will make it much more difficult for other teams to come in and win in Cleveland, as opposed to the Browns coming and winning games on the road. That's the next step for this franchise if they want to be a Super Bowl team.
And we got an outsider's perspective, too. And this is Jordy from Vancouver, and he has a podcast called The Gambler's Prophecy.
What was it like to have the Browns back in the playoffs? Now, I'm a Ravens fan, so we made it, so I'm okay that you guys made it. I'm glad that you guys made it. I wish the Steelers didn't, but, you know, you got to live with that. It was great to see the Browns back in the playoffs. Honestly, it's been too long. It's been a two-horse race in that division for a long, long time. And I see the tides turning, man. I think Big Ben's about to either his arm's going to fall off or he'll retire. Joe Burrow and the Bengals, obviously Baker and the Browns are coming up, and then Lamar and the Ravens. Like, I can't wait. Steelers can finish fourth every year for all I care, but those other three teams, those three young quarterbacks, yeah, I can't wait. It was great to see them in the playoffs. I can't wait for a divisional round matchup. It was great. It was no surprise at all to me personally. I had them pegged in. I'm so glad the Steelers were absolutely riled. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It made me feel good. It's no surprise to me at all. It was great to see him back in the playoffs.
Thank you, Jordy. I also asked our guests how they will remember this 2020 Cleveland Browns season.
For me, how I'm going to remember this season for the Cleveland Browns, this year was the year that we went, we're here, and we're here to stay.
I felt like a kid opening gifts on Christmas. I was born in 97, so I do not really remember the Browns ever really being good since I've been alive. I've been a fan since birth and a Cleveland sports fan, diehard fan, thanks to my father. He passed away in 2014, but he would have loved this run. Many times this season I smiled thinking of him and the bond we had with the Browns and how we bonded over them and how much he would love this season. So yeah, it was cool, bittersweet. It was neat.
The Cleveland Browns have distilled hope back in the city. They have done something very special this year, especially with things going on with COVID. They made it a season to remember. They were the one highlight of the year when we were filled with darkness this season, and we still are. And all I can say is I hope that next season we can go back to having fans in the stands, being able to attend training camps, and being able to do some things normal again. But all I want to do is say thank you to the Cleveland Browns and the organization for truly creating a truly memorable 2020 season.
It really was nothing short of memorable.
It was really great having everybody contribute to this podcast. This was what we've kind of always wanted to be, somebody who reaches out to many people in the community. Our format has changed a little bit because of COVID, but these guys, these guests that responded to our questions and contributed so much, they came through, and again, they went above and beyond, and you guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thanks for including me and having me on the show. It's great to finally be excited about Browns football. It could be a fun time for sports in Cleveland. You know, it's always going to be a football-first city, so as long as the Browns are playing well, then the city's happy. But it's great when we have all the sports teams coming together to represent Cleveland, and makes me proud to be from Northeast Ohio. Thanks again. Feel free to check out History's B-Side podcast. You can find us on anchor.fm/History's B-Side or on most major podcast networks. Thanks again. Go Browns.
Thanks to the Cleveland podcast for giving me the opportunity to at least consolidate my thoughts as we head towards the 2021 season. Go Browns.
And now I'm going to switch back over to my conversation with Fred for a little more of our usual silliness. How you been, Fred?
I have been doing my thing. I have been muddling and moving and, gained a little bit of mud pounds, but I've lost some mud pounds. So I'm kind of just a miniature mud monster. Not, miniature for me, which is still ginormous. But, I'm like, I guess you could say I've gone from a Ford F-150 to just a regular old Ford, which is still big, but not like ginormous.
I think most people go the other way during COVID. Gain pounds from sitting inside.
I gained quite a few, but I've been able to kind of keep it to keep it down. And don't get me wrong, I've definitely gained weight since my height of my weight loss before COVID, but I've somehow maintained the physique that I had pre-COVID. So somehow I've maintained the form I had despite gaining like 15, 20 pounds. It's hard to get into the gym. We're not playing sports like we were. Oh yeah, that's right. It's just so difficult. Although I did get a bike though. I got a stationary bike from the parent mud monsters. They didn't know how to use it, so so I was down there for a period of time, back home in the home mud city, and they said, "Do you want a bike? That we're not using it." And I was like, "Oh well, sure." I didn't think it'd be. It's quite cheap, and you can actually fold it. You can move it around and everything. It's quite good. But I think my neighbors don't like me pedaling so hard at 5 o'clock in the morning.
You're one of those neighbors.
Well, the bike's pretty quiet. It's just me, just like, whoo, whoo, whoo. Because I go pretty fast on the bike. This is what I do. Somehow the mud adds extra aerodynamics.
Me ride bike.
Me strong. Mud is in the wheels and the spikes and the spodes or whatever.
Why don't we talk about sports?
I had no idea Antonio Brown will be signed, and the very troubled wide receiver who once threw gummies in the shape of penises at his baby mama. I thought there's no way you're going to recover from that, and yet he played his way to a Super Bowl. I'm like, good for you, but at the same time, I can't get the image of those penis-shaped gummies. I just can't. It's just I'm forever scarred thinking about that Instagram live feed. Derrick Henry getting 2,000 yards. That's a big deal. He joined the 2,000-yard rushing club. Wow. And all to just lose to my Ravens. Yeah. Playoffs.
Oh, no.
Woo! We won a game. Who cares if we lost to Buffalo? Lamar's stepping in the right direction. Yeah, Josh Allen's got a good arm. You can say that, but Lamar's gonna put it all together. It just takes a little bit of time. Peyton Manning took a little while. If Lamar's got a win under his belt, I say that is huge progress to get over those demons. Now it's just about next year we'll just lose in the title game, and I'll take that. And then we'll go to the Super Bowl, lose in the Super Bowl. Then year 6, he'll win the Super Bowl, and then it'll be all worth it.
There were 2 brand new stadiums in the NFL this year. The Las Vegas Raiders and the one in Los Angeles. And pretty much both of them went unused, if I'm not mistaken.
Pretty much, yeah.
They didn't have a lot of fans there.
That's fair. They think, we're going to have all these fans here. And then lo and behold, the stadiums are just empty. There's nothing there. Well, it's also disappointing, too, because the Rams released their new uniforms, and that was, of course, a wonderful reception to those wonderfully new uniforms that seem to get rid of the classic Rams look. But surprisingly, they made the playoffs, and they actually look pretty decent. Then they went up against the Seahawks. Who would have thought that the Seahawks would have lost so badly to the Rams, who had Jared Goff with a broken thumb. And then they traded Jared Goff. Yeah, Matthew Stafford, I think they threw a pick in there, right? For like a
first round picks in 2022 and 2023, in addition to Jared Goff.
It's going to be interesting to see what Detroit does with that pick. I think that's going to be Los Angeles against those. But Matthew Stafford on the Rams,
no,
that's going to
it'll be Detroit. It will be Detroit who gets those picks.
Oh, right. I always struggle with whose teams get what draft picks.
Well, it's interesting because Jared Goff went to a Super Bowl, and what did Matt Stafford do?
Went to the wild card round and lost like 4 times. Well, 3 times. Matthew Stafford is kind of like Jeff George without character concerns. Throws the ball deep, kind of is a little bit of an underperformer, but hey, you never know with the Rams. They have all those guys out there. They have Jalen Ramsey. They've got Aaron Donald. And fun fact, Aaron Donald can bench press over 500 pounds. I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, 500 pounds? Like, man, he can actually bench press a mud monster. I couldn't believe it.
The Rams must think pretty highly of Detroit's quarterback if they're willing to give that much up for him.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do with that. But I don't know if they're probably going to need a more solid run game. Although Cam Akers had a pretty decent performance against the Seahawks. And who knows, maybe, John Wolford doesn't look like such a bad quarterback. He had a 75-yard rushing game along with 250 yards. And so, that's not too bad. But around the rest of the league, the Cardinals looked pretty darn cool. They were throwing that pigskin and they were getting all types of yards. And at one point I was a little bit worried because Kyler Murray was on pace to break Lamar's rushing yards record. And then he got less than 1,000 yards. I'm like, yes, our quarterback is still more athletic.
Kyler Murray looked pretty good.
I think he even beat the Bills, who went to the AFC Championship game on the Kyler
last
Murray.
Minute. I think I watched that earlier today. A last minute touchdown at the very end of the game.
Right, and it's amazing to think that he has such a great arm for someone so small. I mean, he looks like half of a mud monster, and you combine them together, you get basically my size. And yet, this man could throw the ball much better than I ever could. Now, I personally think I could throw a pigskin pretty decently back in the days of younger youth, but lo and behold, I am well past my prime now. I am now past the prime. I'm a man in my mid-20s. I am now past that moment in my life. But then there's also all types of other stuff, too, with other quarterbacks. Speaking of athletic quarterbacks, Cam Newton. Who would have thought he'd play for the Patriots? The Patriots were awful. I guess you could say now the Patriots finally know mediocrity after 20 years. It's amazing to think that new generation Patriots fans never experience the pain of loss. I remember talking to the Papa, the Mud Monster, about this, and he said, the Patriots are good? He's like, I still can't believe that they're any good. They were terrible the entire time when I was a boy, and they were terrible when I was an adult, and now suddenly they win all these Super Bowls, and he's like, I sometimes just think it's just not real.
Would you have guessed when Tom Brady and the New England Patriots went their separate ways that Tom Brady would end up in the Super Bowl and the Patriots would end up with Cam Newton as quarterback, not in the playoffs at all?
I definitely did not think that. I thought that they would both be first-round exits, and then lo and behold, I was proven terribly wrong because teams can't seem to get their crap together. It's like, come on, the man's 43. He doesn't even have the same arm anymore, but then you throw in all the old quarterbacks. You got a quarterback with pretty much a similar noodle arm, and Drew Brees, and yes, he has a noodle arm. Also, can't blame him. He had a punctured lung, and a collapsed lung. It was kind of not a great scene. But anyway.
It was sad in the last game between Tom Brady and Drew Brees that New Orleans went out with 3 interceptions. Drew Brees went out with 3 interceptions in the last half, and he did not look happy with the way that ended. At all.
But at least we'll get to hear him on Sunday Night Football, and then you'll hear his analysis, and then it'll be interesting to see how he does with his broadcasting career. And then the Falcons, they have the first Asian American kicker, so that was really cool to see. I was like, you go. He had some really cool moments. And then, of course, you had the rest of that Atlanta team. They were still kind of an interesting offense, and also a former Raven was on there. Hayden Hurst had a pretty good season, over 600 yards. And then, of course, there's a rookie running back who did pretty darn good, and J.K. Dobbins, who had 6 straight touchdowns and won in 6 consecutive games at one point in time, which is considered a Ravens record. And on top of it, the Ravens also ran for over 400 yards. And the last team to do that did it several decades ago. And matter of fact, I do believe the last time that a team got over 400 rushing yards was almost 50 years ago. So this is just absurd. Now, of course, I'm talking about my Ravens, but we set a lot of records this year, and I was very happy about all the accomplishments we had this particular year. But of course, there's obviously though the Browns have a great running game now. Yeah, also some other interesting offenses that are running around the league. The Steelers actually had an okay offense until Big Ben's arm just completely turned into dust. But hey, at least you have Chase Claypool who will be on social media saying, "Well, we were better. We were always better." And you also have Juju Smith-Schuster, who you can see wonderful TikToks of him dancing in opposing stadiums on the logo, and you go, Corvette, you just lost.
I think that loss was well deserved by the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Cleveland Browns when Juju Smith-Schuster was talking crap.
Oh yeah, I always remember this. I remember the shootout that the Browns had with the Steelers in the last playoff game that they had, which was the 2002-2003 season. And I remember Kelly Holcomb?
Yeah.
And everyone thought he's the future. And he's flinging that rock into wide receivers not nearly as good as the ones that the Browns have now. And they did such a wonderful job. And then the Steelers just found a way to get back into that game. I think that was the year that they had Tommy Maddox. I think that was the year that he had that really crazy season, the comeback player of the year after selling insurance. Who would have thunk? How do you lose to a guy that was an insurance salesman just about a year or two ago? That's pretty depressing. But hey, then again, though, Adam Thielen almost got an internship selling dental equipment. So until he got the call to participate in one of the NFL Combine little performances outside of the regular Combine, and all of a sudden he got noticed by the Vikings. So hey, if things turned out differently, you could have been talking about Tommy Maddox, the top insurance salesman in the Denver area, and Adam Thielen, the great dental equipment salesman. Can you imagine? You knocks on the door and you go, "Hi, I'm Adam Thielen. Do you need dental equipment? Because I've got the things for you."
Do you think, in your opinion, do these teams have asterisks next to them in any of these sports? No. Basketball, baseball, football, hockey.
Maybe because I like them all, but no.
No asterisks. They all earn this.
It's all athletics. It's all the obviously fans play a role, but hey, it's a different dynamic. Now there's no fans. If you're not used to that, then that really throws you off. These are people who've played in front of packed stadiums their entire lives, pretty much since their childhood. Like now, of course, the little childhood bleachers are a little bit smaller than an actual stadium, but yet these kids who grow into professional athletes, they're used to seeing all these crowds. They play up to the crowd. Lamar Jackson talked about it, where he said, well, it's tough to not play with the crowd. He plays to the crowd. And if you're a showman athlete like that, it makes sense. It helps pump you up. Fans give you the extra little mile that you need to win not win football games, to win athletics in general. And now there's no one there. So now psychologically things are a little bit off kilter. But don't get me wrong, though. The impact of less travel is pretty significant. But there's just other things, the potential impact of COVID and just the frustrating situation with trying to just make sure protocols are kept and changing your life to completely meet those protocols. There are different pros and cons to each. And so I'd say it's not much different from a regular championship. I think maybe it's a little bit easier, maybe, but I don't know. This seems like the athletes in general had a lot of trouble with adjusting to a sport without fans watching live.
Did you see that there are like 16 players have a higher salary than the entire Cleveland Indians payroll this upcoming year?
Really? Let me guess. Is one of them Bryce Harper?
I don't know, but I just thought that was really interesting.
They also traded Francisco Lindor. Now
Right.
he's a Met. I remember the Mets being the butt of all the jokes.
And Santana.
And Santana, that's right. Yeah,
right.
They both got traded. I just remember Francisco Lindor. I'm an Orioles fan at heart, so that's just, I don't really pay attention to baseball all too much. I do know some of our first round picks, but the fact of the matter is I'm just like, oh, we're not like where we used to be. I know Manny Machado's now on the Padres, and good for him. I like Manny. Chris Davis actually had a resurgent season, so I'm like, hey, that's good. I wish you'd had the season when we were actually decent and not pulling off stuff near the Mendoza line a couple years ago when we were making the playoffs. But hey, better now than never. So good on him. I'm trying to think of all the other different sports. There's another talking about other sports. This is super recent. The contract for Lionel Messi got leaked, and so the man has made over $500 million or euros in salary since 2017. 500 million euros. Can you imagine what you do with all that money? What would you do with that money, Caesar?
500 million?
500 million. $500 million.
I'd rebuild a suburb.
Yeah, that's quite noble of you.
Yeah. You could make money and serve the community at the same time.
I just make a plunger museum.
Toilet plunger?
Toilet plunger. That's one of that. Believe it or not, that was one of my favorite toys as a kid growing up because I had to use it so often. I was terrible. I have this very strange combination in terms of I'm remarkably very in the middle of my parents, and one has as a pretty good system, and the other one is just like it will going to the bathroom. It will happen. What will happen? It could take a week. It could take 2 days. It just happens. So then that leaves me in the middle. So sometimes it leads to disastrous results. And yes, I know that our listeners didn't want to know that, but I don't care because this creates a personal connection between Fred and the listener. Now you know what happens to me. Now, I've not used the plunger that much recently because I've been eating healthier. So it turns out the simple solution was, hey, I need to eat those things I don't like broccoli, cauliflower, and green beans. I can never eat green beans. Only covered in cheese. Which just totally ruins the point. I think, but then
wait, did you say green beans covered in cheese?
Yes.
I've never. It might be kind of good. Hey, something I thought about the other day? I actually had this in a dream of all things. I was at a Browns football party, like a watch party, and they were serving carrots with peanut butter, which were brown and orange.
Oh. Before we go, though, we got to talk about the team, everyone's favorite Ohio team, the one that thinks that could beat the Browns and the Bengals, and that is, of course, the Ohio State Buckeyes, with Justin Fields taking the team to the BCS championship, where they lost to a historic Devonta Smith, who won the Heisman, a wide receiver. A big deal.
Well, before we got there, we got to make Dabo Swinney eat his words.
That's so true. That's indeed. It was sweet revenge after all those years of getting let down by Clemson and then Dabo Swinney insulting the Buckeyes.
And the Buckeyes taking it to him. Ohio State only won 5 games in the regular season. The Big Ten allowed them in the championship anyway. And Dabo Swinney didn't care too much for that. And then the BCS championship allowed them into the playoffs. And Ohio State beat up on Clemson before they had a difficult championship game. Some say it was the best team ever, the Alabama team. And it might have been, but Trey Sermon got hurt on the opening drive of the football game of the championship. Justin Fields was already hurt, and 13 players were out with COVID on Ohio State. So it was an uphill battle.
Certainly, particularly against that team. With all those great players, it's just they actually had a quarterback this time. I couldn't believe it. He actually could throw the ball. I was like, wow, I haven't seen that in a while for Alabama. Although they had some interesting players. They had, oh my goodness, Jalen Hurts, who was there before he transferred to Oklahoma. And then, of course, you also had Tua Tagovailoa. Yes, I can say that name. And yes, it's awesome to say.
But just in general, it was an odd year for sports.
In general, yeah, it's been a very interesting year. Although, of course, there's also one last little sport as well. We didn't want to bring this up because, well, they're an LA team, they're a big market, but the Los Angeles Lakers with former Cavaliers star LeBron James did win the championship. I know that we didn't talk about the NBA too much, but it is what it is. We had to cover all these other sports, so but it's been fun to talk about all these different sports and updates because obviously, when we talk about the quintessential elements of transmogrification, aka sports, It really is a wonderful thing that can transform people's lives and can open up all types of wonderful new dialogue. I mean, after all, we got an hour and 30 minutes of dialogue from one particular group of guests. That's pretty good. That's a lot of dialogue to try and sort through. So shout out to all the wonderful conversations that started Due to Sports, but also as a good PSA, please don't start stupid arguments about LeBron James or Michael Jordan or who's the GOAT in this sport. It's all subjective. In the end, it's all about celebrating the time, the moment, the place where you get to be together with people, even on the TV, and also see your team on the national stage.
One of my favorite comments from the NBA championship and the Lakers winning was, if a team wins an NBA championship in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, do they still win?
I suppose. Like I said, I think it's legit.
Yeah. We had a lot of fun, don't you think?
I say so. I didn't know this much about the Browns. Really?
I know.
I maybe I know too much now.
I know. I learned way more this week than I did the entire season.
It's weird to say that I might know more about this team now than the Ravens. I mean, I've never listened to a Ravens podcast, but hey, you know what? I should probably know more about the team in the city that I live in. So this is rather fair.
And we are the Cleveland Podcast.
That's true. We're not the Baltimore Podcast. We're not the Cincinnati Podcast. We're not the Pittsburgh Podcast. We are the Cleveland Podcast because we're the number one team in the number one city in the AFC North. Well, Cleveland Browns. But you get the point. I'm just trying to act it all up because, semantics.
All right. Well, it was fun. Later. Thanks for listening to the show. You can find us online at facebook.com/The Cleveland Podcast, or get links to all of our various different social media pages at theclevelandpodcast.com. Our episode notes for this and other episodes can be found in the photo albums on our Facebook page. You can follow along as you listen, as well as learn more from our sources about the subjects that we cover. You can also find links on our website to our YouTube channel, Spreaker, Google Play, Apple iTunes, Spotify, and more. Leave us a voicemail at 216-200-7940. Send us an email at theclevelandpodcast@gmail.com or interact with us on Reddit, Facebook, or Twitter. We'd love to use your comments, ideas, and feedback in the show. We are a community-based podcast, so the more community interaction, the better. Have a great day, Cleveland.
My precious.